Welcome to the Flow Podcast, fearlessly leading our way. This podcast is a space dedicated to spotlighting the unfiltered voices of Black women in their unique leadership journeys. I am your host, Angela V. Harris. I'm an award-winning coach, speaker, author, and champion for Black women. Make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast to stay connected to our conversations. Let's get ready to flow. Hey, fearless leaders. Welcome back to another episode of the Flow Podcast. I'm your host, Angela V. Harris. If you're a fan of the TV show Scandal, you know Olivia Pope as the ultimate fixer, the one called in to clean up messes, solve the impossible, and somehow make magic happen under pressure. Well, in real life, Black women in leadership are often put in similar situations. They're handed underperforming teams and possible budgets or broken systems where failure seems inevitable. They're not just expected to lead, they're expected to fix it all, often without the support or resources they deserve. Can any of you relate to that? But here's the thing, just like Olivia Pope, Black women show up, rise up, and work their magic to turn things around. And no one exemplifies this resilience better than my guest today, Dr. Jacqueline Dowdy. Dr. Jacqueline is a powerhouse leader who has consistently defied the odds. In roles where the expectation might have been for her to fail, she not only succeeded, she thrived. From navigating turbulent environments to transforming organizational deficits into triumphs, her journey is nothing short of inspiring. In today's conversation, Dr. Jacqueline shares her remarkable story and introduces us to her D3 Leadership Blueprint, a framework designed to turn delays, deficits, and deceptions into opportunities for growth and transformation. If you've ever felt the weight of unrealistic expectations or wondered how to rise above impossible circumstances, this episode is for you. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Angela. How are you doing today?
I am well. I'm well. Just returned from a nice vacation. I took my first trip to Paris, so I spent a week in Paris exploring Black culture.
That is awesome. That's on my bucket list.
I highly recommend. I will say the weather wasn't the greatest while we were there, but we had amazing guides, and I was just so fascinated by the architecture of the city and just being able to experience the culture and seeing the people sit out in front of the cafes every day. So I loved it, and I definitely see myself going back.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with me because it's definitely on my bucket list.
I
Um,
recommend it. I hopefully
yes.
won't be raining when you go. Well, Dr. Jacqueline, your bio is so rich with experience and achievements. Can you start by telling us about your journey in faith-based leadership and how your faith has guided your career over the years?
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. So basically my goal was always to be a servant leader. I've always, since I finished school, wanted to do something that was meaningful in the world, which means, I wanted to really be serving in my purpose. And so one of the things that I had to consider at that young age was, do I want to make money or do I just want to help people? And so what I decided to do, I said, well, I'm a business person. I love math. So I decided to become an accountant. And while I was in that role as an accountant, as starting out my profession, I worked for a not-for-profit. That was back in the early 80s. And it was such an extraordinary experience working because that's where I learned and became very familiar with working for not-for-profits, as well as working for being an advocate for people who are dealing with mental health issues, addiction, as well as um, uh, prison. And they were in prison and working with families who had family members who were um, in prison. So, I ran a support group for that. And so, as my career progressed, I was called into the ministry. Being called into the ministry, I decided to go to seminary, but I couldn't go to just any seminary.
Mhm.
Basically, the Lord just led me. He says, "Your ministry is integrated." And what I mean by that is that it was the business and the faith part that went together. So I went on this venture. I stepped out in faith, went on this venture of finding out what this integrated ministry was all about. So basically, I came across a seminary that provided not only a seminary, but also a concentration in business administration. So I started out with that, and life happened, and I ended up transitioning back to North Carolina from Atlanta, and but I did finish my seminary degree. So later on, during that time, that's where my higher ed experience began. I was working for a college here in North Carolina, one of the large HBCUs in Durham, North Carolina. And in working with them, I was able to do some great work there. And so that became part of my career, and I used it as my integrated platform. And once I finished seminary, I was actually asked to transition to Tallahassee, Florida, where I worked for Florida A&M University, which was a great experience because one thing, I'll just put this out there, I have a love for our historically Black colleges and universities. I know we have challenges, but these colleges and universities have really played a major part and role in the African American community and giving people an opportunity to get educated and progress in life. So I really honor the work that the men and women do in that space. So that's where my higher ed experience happened. But as you know, I went into a situation that was turbulent, but it really required a lot of resiliency in working in an environment that was unsteady. Um, but in that environment, there were many challenges that I faced, and I faced them head on, and I was able to do some good work there. And then I transitioned to another organization, which is another HBCU. And in there was other challenges there. And so one of the things I was like, okay, now, I've been told that I'm a catalyst for change, but how in the world do I end up in these organizations that have all these challenges? And I'm always having to go in and be the fix it cleanup woman, right? So I started embracing that. It was very difficult, but I really started embracing that because I it got to a point I understood that there was really a gift in me, to be able to have some foresight, be able to be a strategic thinker in how to pull things back together, and how to make the engine run. And so, in those experiences, I went to another university that was experiencing some turbulence. And after that journey, I ended up with a nonprofit organization, which was a behavior health organization that had been in the community for almost 50 years. Walked in the door in that situation with a $1.8 million deficit, and the organization was about to fold. Um, I did not know that when I walked in the door, because when I walked in the door, the auditors were there, and I didn't find it out until after the audit was over. But I still continued to just take it on, although it took a lot of fasting and praying um, to walk in the organization and be faced with that. And not only was I faced with the deficit in the situation that the organization was dealing with, but I was faced with dealing with working with people, um, building a team, gaining trust, them trusting me, me trusting them. So that was an experience by itself. And as you know, any new CEO walking in the door, you're making an assessment of everything and people. And sometimes you have to let some people go, and sometimes you have to do some um, reorganization in the organization to try to make it work, and looking at everything. And so that's what I had to do. I still took on the challenge. Now I will say that within 3 years I was able to transition that deficit, um, turn it around in
Wow.
3 years. And also, after we turned the deficit around, COVID hit us. And in turning that deficit around, that was a major accomplishment. But when COVID hit, I was like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? But what I did not let my staff see, you know, me react to it. But what I did is I got my core team together, and we started working on a strategic plan on how we were going to make it through COVID. We didn't, nobody understood how long it was going to be, what the outcome or the implications of any of it would be. So what we did is we just started thinking, okay, how can we keep most people a job? How can we continue to serve our clients, because we could not stop serving the clients, and we had a program in the jail system. We couldn't stop serving those guys either. So we came up with a very strategic plan in how we could continue to serve the clients and continue to keep the staff working and they receiving a check to take care of their families. um, so we looked at the budget. We did some budget strategies with the budget and with the payroll. It worked, and it was only a temporary fix until we got out of the COVID situation. We were able to take advantage of the PPP funding. And so that we got through that. But the term, and I was able to bring in some funding, about $7 million of additional funding to the bottom line. But what you have to understand is when you walk into a deficit that huge, and when you go through a situation like a pandemic and you're already strapped for funding, then you have to go we had to go back I had to go back and just really look at the organization again and figure out a strategy. We were able to do some of that, but it got to the point that it was really tight. And so I started looking for funding from the state level, which we were able to land some funding from them. But at the same time, it still wasn't enough for us to continue to operate. So I was trying some other things to help bring that back together and to sustain the organization by possibly doing some partnerships and things like that. And of course, that sometimes it doesn't work. But what I would tell leaders is when you get to that point, that plateau point, and you know that it's time for you to make a transition and a pivot, you have to listen to yourself, because that really took me down a path of just really neglecting me and taking care of myself, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so, one of the things as women, no offense to men, but as women, when we put our hands to the plow, we normally don't let it go until we have gotten our results. And so that's where I was, but not understanding that I knew it was time for me to transition, but I didn't transition. So I had to make some decisions in my life to transition out of that space in order for me to take care of myself. And as leaders, we sometimes neglect to take care of ourselves. And we sometimes don't know when it's time for us to transition. So as I transitioned, I began to really reflect on my experiences throughout my career and the fact that everywhere I went or worked, I served in key leadership roles in which I was always faced with so many challenges. So, in reflecting on that, I discovered that, in all of my career, I have experienced delays, deficits, and deception. And so as I began to think about that, at first I didn't understand why would I talk about that. But as I began to really look at those three D's, and I actually researched them from a biblical perspective as well. When I look at some of the, you know, men and women in the Bible and how they actually went through delays,
Mhm.
deficits, and
Yeah.
deception, I translated that into the real world of leadership, right? And
Yeah.
so that's how the D3 leadership blueprint came about. And with that, I was like, I've been through deficits, delays, and deception. And one of the things that I realized too, and I want people to understand, is that deficits are not always just what your bottom line looks like. Deficits can be a deficit in character, a deficit in experience, a deficit in workforce. Deficits are deficits, regardless of what it is. There you can experience deficits. This D3 blueprint can apply to an individual's life. It can apply to business. It can apply to your professional endeavors. As you're thinking about what path you're going to take in your professional life, you can think about it in your faith walk, where you are, and it can be applied. And so I've had a lot of time to really think about this, and really pray about it. And in writing the book will be out soon. It's D3 Leadership Blueprint, turning deficits, delays, and deceptions into triumphs. And so basically, it talks about, as leaders, one, when we make mistakes, how do we overcome those mistakes? We have to overcome mistakes because one thing about us as leaders, we want to always make sure that we are making the best decisions. We don't like to make errors and mistakes, but even when you make mistakes, learning how to turn those mistakes into opportunities for growth. And
Mhm.
so, um, and I'll tell you, as I have been writing this book, I have grown in some areas in my professional life and my spiritual life, and understanding that these things will happen, but we cannot allow them to stop us from moving forward and continuing to grow in all areas of our lives. And so, D3 Leadership Blueprint, it's not just a blueprint, a book, but it's something that will provide you with principles. It will help you with your resiliency. It will help you become an authentic leader, a transformational leader. And in the book, I really talk about everything: emotional intelligence, as it relates to deficits, delays, and deception. I talk about retention and attrition as it
Mhm.
relates to deficits, delays, and deceptions. And not only talking about it, but giving you some really good solutions and recommendations on how you can assess your situation and put some strategic plans into action to really help move your organization, your business, or even your life forward. So there's a lot in this, and addressing deficits, managing your delays, and combating the deception. It applies to everything in life. And I'm going to stop right there because you may have another question for me.
Yeah, well, you certainly experienced a lot in your careers. I can see why that led you to develop the D3 concept: delays, deficit, and deception. So when I think about that concept or the topic, I know oftentimes our timing does not align with God's timing. And I heard you talk about fasting and praying to help you get through some of those challenging work situations. What scripture did you rely on during those times?
I'll tell you, I looked a lot at, first of all, let me tell you the characters that I looked at, that I really studied. Um, One was Abraham, in Genesis 11. Um, and just the fact that the Lord had called Abraham to leave his home, right? And told him that he had something greater for him. I left my home like 17 years ago to go to a place I'd never been before. I never even been to a Tallahassee, Florida, right? And but I ended up staying in Florida for 17 years. And in those 17 years, I was on a journey of learning. I was on a journey of growing and making mistakes and just really understanding who I am as a person, as a leader. And not only what did I work, I was even a full, not a full time, but a pastor at the same time. So I was doing a lot. I was working on, it was in Florida that I received my MBA. I got my PhD. I pastored two churches, and I worked full time. And so I did a lot during my time on my professional journey. But I was determined that, and one of the things that I know is that if you put your mind to it, you can do it. The sky is the limit. And so for me, I just continued to do the work. But a lot of times when we're on this journey of life, we don't really like get it. We don't know you know, what is our true purpose. We kind of have an inkling of what our purpose is, and we think that, we're in this job and this is our purpose. But God always have this huge underlining um uh life for us, purpose for us, that we have not even tapped into. And so when you go through that journey, you're on it, but because you're on it and you got things going on in life, we sometimes lose sight of our purpose, right? And so I got to a point, and I believe just like Abraham, he got to a point where he lost sight of what God had said to him. He's told him that he was going to give him the promise, right? They thought that it was Ishmael. They tried to do it in their own way. And I think oftentimes as leaders, when we get in that system of work, of the workforce, and being leaders and doing and making things happen, we do forget about our purpose. We do forget about what we really was called to do, right? And so I think I got lost
Mm.
in that journey. I got lost in that journey. I lost some of the sense of who I am, as far as before I started the journey. I was very sure about who I am, right? I was very sure about what I was called to do. I was very sure, but I got caught up in that race and lost sight. Even as a pastor, I still got lost in it, and I lost myself in it. So, what I'm saying to any leader, don't lose yourself, but always check in with your purpose. Check in with God and say, you know what, Lord, am I really walking in my purpose? Because what my coach and mentor, Israel Duran, he said to me last week, to the whole group, that in the world system, we are we're doing, we're being, and then we're having,
Mm.
right? Whereas the the system of Christ is be being, doing, and having, right? So when he wrote that on the board that way, and he had those two, had a line between the two, the contrasting events, um, it just like a light bulb went off in my head. Like, okay, I was on this side of being, doing, and having, but as I matriculated in my professional life, I lost sight of who I am and doing what I was called to do and having all of what God had for me, right? And so, right now, as I've been writing this book, I am working my way back to becoming who God has made me to be and purposed me to be, and doing the work that He has purpose for me to do. And that comes to my favorite scripture. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will happen in your life. And that's Matthew 6 and 33. And so I've always lived my life in that regard. But what I understand now is I got caught up in this race of leadership in the secular world and also in pastoring, and I forgot about my full purpose. So I said all that to say I have come full circle with this, the birth of D3 Leadership Blueprint, because now I understand the pieces and the parts are coming together. That sometimes we have to go through the thing that we have to be a blessing
Mm. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
others, right? And because some people will say, why am I going through all of this? There's a purpose in our journey, and there's a purpose for the adversity that we face. There's a purpose for um, things that happen in our lives that we don't understand. But what we have to really embrace is that God has a bigger purpose for our lives. God has already determined our end in the beginning. And so if he's determined that, and he's put a purpose in you, he's going to deliver on the purpose in our lives. And even now, um, I'm writing, I'm, well, let me just say, one of the things that God has impressed upon me about my life is that I'm at a point of reset. And in that, and what I'm discovering now is because my question is, okay, so what is my reset like? What am I to do in this season of resetting, right? I want to know, because I want to make sure that I embrace this resetting in my life right now. And then he said, then there will be a period of, I'll go into a season of rejuvenation. Okay. So I'm like, okay, so I want to embrace resetting, rejuvenation. And then the third one was reignite. So I was like, okay, reset, rejuvenation,
Mhm.
and reignite. So my thing is, okay, I know in the end something great is going to happen. Something is going to happen, right? And so in this season of resetting, and that's why I wrote the first book that I wrote was More Than Conquerors: 31 Daily Declarations to uh, a Faith-Filled Mindset, because it first has to take place and root in our mindset on how we change our way of thinking and understanding and hearing God on our purpose. Because everything that happens to us in life, you have to pull all that stuff together and reflect on it and mull through it. And you know what? In all the stuff that we go through, we begin to find our purpose. And I believe for me, I'm beginning to find my purpose in all of the stuff
Mhm.
that I've experienced, that I've gone through. And I summed it up into three D's. And um it has been a period of resetting my mindset, resetting myself to position myself for my purpose, to begin to walk in my purpose, and understanding what that looks like and what that's going to require me to do to walk in my purpose. Because we lose sight of it. And God says, I know the plans I have for you, the plans to prosper you and give you hope in a great future. And so, all that adversity that I've experienced or anybody has experienced, God has a better, bigger plan beyond all of that. And so we just have to change our mindsets to really see what that's like. And I will tell you, it is no easy feat, okay? But it is doable, and you just continue to work on it day by day. You take one day at a time, one step at a time, to really embrace changing your mindset. I know we've gone through the adversity and it hurt. It was awful. It was painful, but there has to come to, you got to take all that adversity, all that pain, all that stuff you went through and say, okay, Lord, how can I use this to advance the kingdom? How can I use this to begin to walk in my purpose? And how can
Mhm.
I use this to help somebody else? And so that's how More Than Conquerors was birthed. That's how the D3 Leadership Blueprint was birthed. And you know what? And I'm really understanding more now what my integrated ministry is.
Mhm.
I thought it was the jobs I had, right? Pastor, CEO. No, God says it's bigger and bigger than that, right? And so now I'm understanding now, okay, it's like putting a puzzle together, right? And I'm still kind of, grappling with, okay, God, I got this. Now I got to know how to deliver it. But what I have done is I've developed a masterclass to really talk about D3 Leadership Blueprint, to talk with leaders or potential leaders or people who want to grow in leadership. Because the thing about it is, um, I can talk to them about deficits, about what you may experience in the workplace when it comes to deficits, and how you can address them, how you can combat them, how you can deal with them and assess them. I can talk about managing your delays, not just managing delays with the project, but managing the delays in your life. I've had personal delays, right? Things that I have wanted God to do, or I've been praying about, and they've been delayed. And it's not because they won't happen, it's just because of God's timing. But
Right.
how do I live with that delay? How do I come to peace with my delays? And also combating deception. What I learned here, that this right here, deception, oh my God, it will kill the trust in any type of relationship, whether it's on the job or in relationships with someone else. but it is a silent killer, especially in organizations, because when you are a leader, you have people around you that you consider your team, right? Your core group of folk that you are transparent with, that you discuss matters with. Those are people that you want to trust. But as a leader, you got to have a discerning spirit to know who is sitting around the table with you. Now, because it can be very tricky in this area, because you hire people to do the job. But what I'm learning now, as I reflect, is not only do you hire people to do the job, but you got to know their emotional intelligence. You got to understand who they are as a person, and be able to ask the right questions in the interview process that will help you to discern if this person is a good fit for your culture, for the organization. All this is in the book
Mm.
to really, understand that, because that was one experience that I did have. And so this application of the D3 leadership blueprint, so whether you're an individual, you're running a business, a startup business, or you're a not-for-profit, or whatever it is, the blueprint is not one size fit all, but it can be applicable to all of those areas, and you can use it to advance your organizations, to grow professionally. I even have two chapters in there that talks about these 3Ds from a spiritual perspective. Um, I just, it was just like I just got a whole lot of different titles that I wanted to talk to, because these 3Ds run deep. And what I realized, and as I've been researching this, a lot of people are not, we can go to school, get a PhD, MBA, whatever degree you have, but they don't talk to you about when you're facing deficits and how you combat those. They don't talk about those delays that you're going to have, um, personally or in your profession. They don't talk about the deception. So I
Mm.
want to, I want to be that voice that God uses to empower leaders to really help them to hone in on these 3Ds so that they can learn. And as they are in their professional roles, that they're learning and they're able to discern what's happening around them, and they can have some tools to help them to navigate in their workplace.
Well, I heard you talk about the fact that you felt like you lost yourself at a certain point in your career, and I know some women know that it's time for them to leave certain situations, but we tend to stay out of, fear and sometimes, comfort. So, what advice would you have for a woman who may know it's time to make that change, but she's still afraid to move forward?
What I would say is this: first, you have to listen to your body, because if you are in a stressful situation and it has impacted your health, that's the first thing you listen to. The second thing is uh, being prayerful about your decision to leave and really hearing God in that process. Now, I heard God, but I didn't move. But there were consequences. I had some consequences for not moving. Um, but I would say you have to really step out and be willing to step out in faith and trust God that He will take care of you. I don't believe that God will want us to be in a situation that is impacting our health, that is not a good situation for us. What I would say, if you know that you're in a toxic situation and you know that it's not good for you, you got to start planning, planning your exit strategy. Plan your exit strategy on what is next. Because a lot of times, what's next is probably the best thing for you. You may not make the same kind of money, you may not have the same position, but you're happy, you're whole, you're free, and you're healthy.
Yeah. That resonates with me because I think I've shared my story with you and for the listeners. I was in a toxic work environment and it did impact my mental and my physical health. And like you said, I started planning for the exit. Was it scary? Absolutely. Yes, it was scary. But like you said, it's also a faith walk as well. And as I'm still on this journey almost 2 years later after leaving my corporate opportunity, God is making a way for me and providing opportunities for me that I would have never, imagined or envisioned. All the rejections that I faced in my corporate career, I just started a program sponsored by Goldman Sachs for Black women entrepreneurs, where I
Awesome.
overlook for promotions and deny promotions in my corporate space. But my company's almost 4 years old, and Goldman Sachs saw something in me in my company to say, hey, we believe in you. We believe in your business. We want to support you.
And all you had to do was make a decision.
And take that first step.
Take that first step. That's where I am. And Angela, when you say that, I mean, it's like chills come over me because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book, is because not only do is this to help leaders while they're in their roles, but it's also to open your mind and your heart to really, really search for your purpose. Because when you find your purpose, you just don't know how many doors that will come open for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. And
You
again, I
know,
guess at one point, I will say I feel like, your purpose kind of evolves. So I guess like when I was in college, I thought my purpose was to enter the workforce and pursue a career in technology. So that purpose, I guess, led me to a new purpose, or my purpose essentially evolved and continues to evolve.
absolutely. And what you did is you took a step of faith. You stepped out of it, a situation that wasn't good for you, not knowing. And that's the thing about us women. We want to know what's going to be step A, the plan A, B, C, D. When
Mm-hmm,
you step out
mm-hmm.
on faith, you don't know the plan,
Yeah,
right? You just know that you're doing what's good for you, and you know that God is with you, and you're going to walk out that door with your faith, and you continue to just seek God for your next move, and next thing you know, God will open the doors. He said your gifts will make room for you. And sometimes we
mhm.
think what we went to school for is what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, yeah.
But God has a different plan. But what he'll do is take what he has allowed us to accomplish, and he'll use it. He'll take it. We go on that journey, and he'll take all that stuff and he'll use it, and then he'll launch us right into our purpose. And then
That's
we're like, oh my God, I didn't realize this is what this was all about. And so I applaud you for making that step, and congratulations on your partnership with Sachs, Goldman Sachs.
you. Thank
And
you.
that's awesome.
It's definitely been a journey, and like you said, every day is literally a faith walk, and in some ways it is uncertain, but I feel more fulfillment and passion in this space than I ever felt when I was working in corporate settings.
Yes. And you feel free. And
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
yeah, and it's
And
still hard work.
you can't. There's certain things that you cannot put a price tag on. And for me, it's my mental and physical health. I'm unwilling to compromise on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing. I see a lot of women who are just tied to their jobs because of the pay. And I get it, because you need money to pay the bills. Um, but at the same time, they're really sacrificing their mental health, their physical health, their family, and just when they get home, they just brain tired,
Mhm.
too tired to do anything. And so I got tired. I honestly was tired of living that life. And I'm going to embrace my reset, and I'm going to embrace my rejuvenation period.
Mhm.
And I am looking forward to reigniting.
Oh, I love that for you. I'm excited. Well, Dr. Jacqueline, before we wrap up, I have one final question for you.
Sure.
What do you do to recharge when you aren't fearlessly leading?
Oh, Angel, that is a big question. That is a big question. Someone actually asked me that question today, this morning. Um, Honestly, in my resetting, I am trying to discover that. One of the things, because I'm now home in North Carolina, I have family here, and I spend a lot of time with my nieces and my nephews. They're little kids now, and they're playing football. They're 7, 8, and let's see, 7, 8, and 6 months old.
Mhm.
So they're playing football, they're doing taekwondo, and the little girl, the only little baby girl that we have, she is adorable. So I get to play with her and spend time
Aw.
with them and go to their games and go to their taekwondo meets and things like that. And it makes me happy. And when I'm spending time with them, just sitting on the sofa and watching a movie with them, a cartoon or whatever. And they come over and they run all through the house, and that's what gives me joy. And so my family's been able to come over and we cook out and have dinner and have meals together. So that's truly a blessing to me. And so I know other things are in store, for me, as far as some of the things that I have been praying about. And I'm just looking forward to it. And I'm ex- I'm excited because I know that I am on the cusp with something great. And I want to really be a blessing to the people and to see them grow and be the best they can be, of becoming who they want to be or who they are.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, it sounds like, to you summarize something you said earlier, you're being, doing, and having.
Yes. So I was excited when Israel Duran put that up there. And I'm like, okay, this is just for me, because that's when the light bulb came on. We start out being who we are, and I am, and
Mhm.
we're doing, and we're moving and shaking, and we're able to have this and do this, and things are coming together. But when you get caught up in that race, you get caught up in that system, all those three things begin to scramble, and they are out of sync. And so where I am now is putting it back in sync of becoming and being and doing. That means walking in my purpose, and having, that means just having the time, having freedom, being happy, that's what I'm working my way to.
Well, Dr. Jacqueline, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. How can our listeners connect with you to learn more about your work in the book when it comes out?
Absolutely. If you would go to www.drjacquelinedowdy.com, then you will find, that's where you will find my D3 leadership blueprint and my masterclass. Also, you can go to www.getredefined.com, viasolutions.com. That is my consulting business where I help companies and I do some coaching and speaking and things like that. And also, my Facebook page is VIABS Vibes. Also, Dr. Jacqueline Dowdy and Jacqueline Dowdy.
All right.
So,
And to the listeners, I'll make sure I'll include all those links in the show notes.
and also the book can be purchased on Amazon.com.
Okay. I'll make sure I include all those links.
Right.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Jacqueline, for joining us today. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning into the Flow podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review and share it with your network. Until next time, continue to lead fearlessly and authentically. Take care. Hey, fearless leaders. Are you ready to align your career with your purpose? If you've reached a point in your career where growth isn't just about titles and paychecks, but about making a real impact, it's time to dig deeper. Imagine having a career that doesn't just look successful on paper, but feels fulfilling and aligned with your personal mission. As a certified coach with over 20 years in corporate as a Black woman in tech, I know firsthand the unique obstacles we face and the power that comes from leading with confidence and purpose. During our work together, we'll define your personal values and align them with your career goals, address self doubt and strengthen your self belief, and build the tools you need to lead authentically and confidently. Let's work together to redefine success on your terms. I see you and I understand your journey. If you're ready to get started, visit AngelaVHarris.com today to book your free discovery call. Can't wait to work with you. Thank you for listening to the Flow podcast. As we wrap up today's episode, always remember your unique path, your voice, and your leadership matter. If you loved what you heard, subscribe now to stay updated on our latest episodes. Take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with someone who can benefit from these conversations. You can stay connected with me on Instagram at The Flow Podcast with Angela, or visit me on the web at AngelaVHarris.com. Until next time, take care, stay inspired, and keep fearlessly leading in your own way.